Welcome to tonight's tale, a fairy tale theater podcast. We're going through every episode of Shelley Duvall's fairy tale theater in alphabetical order. And this month, we are reviewing the episode Pinocchio. I am your host, Emily. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. I'm joined by my co-host, Eric.
Hey guys, I'm Eric. I'm from New York.
And this month, we're lucky enough to have two guest hosts. So first of all, I want to re-welcome our friend Doug.
Hi, from Australia.
And joining us for the first time is Liz.
Hey, I'm Liz. I'm from Providence, Rhode Island.
It's good to see you guys. I want to get a little background from you, Liz, since this is your first time joining us. What's your history with fairy tale theater?
It was a show I watched as a very young kid. I believe my mom probably introduced it to me. She was very big on introducing us to culturally significant things. And I think because it's so jam-packed with celebrities, this was the perfect show to do that. So we would rent it either from my library or from this tiny little video store in my tiny little hometown.
I love that.
Yeah. And then I recently was rewatching some because I was attempting to review the show on TikTok. That kind of fell off, but I have enjoyed rewatching it since. So I treated myself to the full DVD set.
Oh, I love that so much.
Yeah, I love your review videos on TikTok. They're really good.
I'm sorry I don't do them still. Maybe I'll figure out a way to revive them at some point.
We'd love that. Eric, do you have the background information on Pinocchio?
Yes, Pinocchio aired on May 14th, 1984. It was season 3, episode 3.
So it came kind of right in the middle of the show then.
Oh, yes, for sure. And as far as the filming goes of it, it was actually filmed May 9th, 1983 to May 13th, 1983. So actually right before it aired, they were crunching it the year before. So, and then only a few days as per usual. It was directed by Peter Medic.
He's done several.
He's done a bunch.
And the writers, of course, as always, Mark Curtis and Rod Ash was done a lot of them as well.
Excellent. So before we get into our recap and review, what are the first things we remember when we think of the episode Pinocchio? Doug, I'll start with you.
My mind goes straight to Lainey Kazan as the Blue Fairy.
Ah, interesting choice.
Mm-hmm.
She makes an impression.
She does.
And her look is very iconic too, I think, in this episode.
I loved her in this. Anything else spring to mind?
Certainly the Pee Wee Herman of it all. This was probably one of the first episodes I watched because Pee Wee's Playhouse was a regular show in my house. And I also was surprised when I rewatched this on how many of the jokes just hit this nostalgic part of my brain so hard. I think I watched this a million times, but these legs, they bend in the middle. And when Delaney's like, your nose is gonna grow and to grow, I was just like, oh my God, it's all coming back to me now, like Celine Dion sang.
Love that reference.
She's gonna grow.
Yeah, it's so funny. And I think even just that opening with, and I know we'll probably talk about that more with Shelley in the puppet shop, it's iconic to me for this series in general.
Oh, I love that. Eric, what are your first thoughts when you think of Pinocchio?
Oh, it's just Pee Wee. I loved Pee Wee so much as a kid. I loved all the movies. I loved Pee Wee's Playhouse. I saw Pee Wee's Playhouse on Broadway in the early 2000s.
I'm so jealous of that.
Wow.
Yeah, so I was a big Pee Wee fan. Well, Pee Wee was always on in my household. Big Top Pee Wee, all of it. I've seen all of it, done all of it. And, he was a big part of my childhood as for a lot of us 80s babies, he was a big part of our lives. So, we will really miss Pee Wee. He's the best. Paul Rubens.
Yeah, we just lost Paul, a couple of months ago. It's been very recent. That was my answer. The first thing I think of when I think of Pinocchio is Paul Rubens. We're calling him Pee Wee because this was the height of his Pee Wee phase, but he was a great actor. That
I was curious about that. Was this during the height of it, or was it slightly before even? He was kind of up and coming?
Yeah, it was slightly before. That's true. He'd already created the character.
Right.
It hadn't
for the live show. Yeah.
Right.
The live shows.
It hadn't quite taken off the way it would. That's true.
Yeah. And I think it's what's cool is obviously if you love Pee Wee, you get a lot from this episode, but I don't think he's like just doing Pee Wee Herman as Pinocchio. I think he's giving Pinocchio his own life in the part.
I agree. I completely agree. How familiar is everyone with the original source material? Eric, have you read the book?
I have not. I remember being a lot younger, and I do remember starting to read the book. It is quite a daunting book for a child to read, and I was being brave as I was a young child to try to read it. My mom bought me like a leather-bound one, and I was like trying, and like it's a lot.
It is.
I have exactly the same story. Honestly, I've read like the first 3 chapters, and then I think I gave up. I'm sorry to say.
Guys, I was the complete opposite. I had this book in my school library, and it was the edition illustrated by Charles Folkard. And if anyone who's listening knows those illustrations, they are just beautiful. And maybe that's what inspired me to keep reading the book. And I loved the original story. And yeah, a beautifully illustrated copy goes a long way to helping a child read a long book.
That makes a lot of sense. I did not have an illustrated copy. That might have helped me.
Well, I think we also we grow up with this expectation that fairy tales are kind of short. So then when we meet the novels like this and Wizard of Oz and stuff, you're like, oh wait, this is like a commitment.
Exactly. The same.
Good way to. I like that.
This is one of my boyfriend's favorite fairy tales. The source material of it is, so we've talked about it a lot because it's kind of bonkers.
And is this the only fairy tale theatre that's based on more of a novel rather than a short fairy tale?
Yes.
I will stand corrected.
Yeah, I think it is. The Snow Queen is like kind of long. Is one of the longer fairy tales, and Beauty and the Beast as well. But
Aladdin was pretty long.
Oh yeah, yep. That's another biggie.
But yeah, this one always stood out. It was always, because it's not a traditional, when I think of fairy tales, Pinocchio doesn't seem to be a fairy tale. I think Disney did a lot to bring like Pinocchio into the mainstream sort of fairy tale children's story world.
For sure. And like a very specific brand of Pinocchio that is not at all like the original novel to me.
No.
The little bit.
And let's be fair, neither is this one.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I think this episode, even though like it takes a lot of plot points that veer away from the book, the vibes of it fit the novel the best to me. Yeah, like the kind of high comedy goofiness of it, obviously like the uber Italianness they're trying to bring to it. I think it's of all the adaptations I've seen, and I've seen the Disney, I've seen the recent Guillermo del Toro, which I loved. I think that this one is probably the closest to the book, just in the style.
Interesting. I wasn't expecting to hear that. What do we remember thinking of the episode when we first saw it? I think we all first saw it as kids. For me, I remember always thinking it was kind of a complicated story. I remember liking the episode. I don't remember loving it. I kind of don't really remember having very strong feelings about it one way or the other, but I'm sure I'm probably alone in that. Eric?
I think I like it so much because of Pee-wee, because when I watched it, Pee-wee was in his height, his full Pee-wee vibe, the Big Adventure had already come out and Pee-wee's Playhouse was on TV because I was born in the late 80s. So this was actually one of the ones that I also had without the artwork that we had rented way too many times. My mother had gotten sick of it at that point. She's like, you know what, we're going to just keep this one. Because I was that obsessed with Pee-wee. I had a Pee-wee doll. Like, if this was, it was another moment for me to see him doing his thing. So, I loved it. It was always a good one for me. So
wonderful. Doug, what do you remember?
I remember being unnerved by this episode because I will speak not for all Australians by any means, but I don't have any recollection of Pee Wee Herman being on television in Australia or anyone talking about it or there being any merchandise. I became aware of it when I was a lot older and American pop culture was a bit more widespread. But no, in the 80s as a child, I was never aware of Pee Wee Herman to the point where this episode just confused me, maybe even alienated me a bit. Plus, the cover artwork was very different from the rest. It was very dark.
Yeah.
There were a few things with this episode which kind of made me think, this is not like the others. There are no princesses, there are no witches. And that was always my draw with the fairy tale theatre. I kind of needed that element. And yeah, it always stood apart a little bit. Yeah, unnerved me, but not in like a bad way, but in just like a cautious way.
That's a great answer. Liz?
Pinocchio in general was a big story for me when I was a kid. I love the Disney one, even though I also found it kind of scary. My mom dressed me and my sister up as Pinocchio and Jiminy Cricket for Halloween one year. So there's just all these Pinocchio memories. I remember watching it, the Disney one, on Christmas when I had like a terrible earache and I like lying on the couch. It was like a comfort watch. So I know I was excited to see this other version of it with an actor and a character that I really loved. And I don't think it disappointed, because even though it deters from the Disney one, it has like the same footprints, school book, puppet show, whale.
Like I said, a bit of a complicated story.
For sure.
Excellent. We're going to start our rewatch and recap. And like all episodes, we start with Shelley's introduction.
Hello, I'm Shelley Duvall. Welcome to Fairy Tale Theater. Tonight's tale comes from Carlo Collodi's famous Italian classic about a little wooden marionette who becomes a real alive boy. Pinocchio.
I love her introduction here. She's in Geppetto's workshop and she's almost dressed like a puppet,
hanging her hands like she's on strings.
I loved it. I thought she looked beautiful. She even puts on a little bit of a fake Italian accent at the end. Do we want to talk about the fake Italian accents in this episode?
I think we have to.
Yeah,
honestly,
it's for sure.
Is anyone in this episode actually Italian?
Great question.
I think Vincent Schiavelli is
Italian. Schiavelli and Vito Scotti, I think.
And Jim Belushi.
Jim Belushi, I was about to say, is Jim Belushi Italian?
And interestingly enough, the three of them probably have the subtlest accents.
Yes.
They don't have to put it on.
And then I think Don Novello, who's the narrator, I think he's Italian because he was in like The Godfather and he was like in a lot of things. He always played like a weird priest. He was even like the weird priest, Father Guido in Casper. That was like his character that showed up a lot, Father Guido, even on Saturday Night Live and stuff.
Yeah, that's an SNL character.
Yeah.
Well, Belushi, I think Schiavelli, I think they, of Italian descent, but I think they're all American born. I think Vito Scotti he might have actually been born in Italy. I'm not positive on that. I'll have to check.
Well, we can definitely agree. It's a very noble attempt by everyone to sound like Mario from Mario Brothers.
Vito was born in Italy. He was. But yeah, it was a little, I don't know if we needed to go a real live a boy. Like, it was a little.
It was very theatrical.
Yeah, it's a little cheesy, but I don't know. I think it's fun, but I also can understand people being like, all right.
It is kind of like Mario. that's a good way of
Mario and Luigi.
Yeah, it is Italian, but it's you get the feeling they're not going for actual, if you go to Italy, this isn't what people sound like. It's more of a cartoony kind of telling. At least that's how I took it.
They listened to That's Amore on repeat and they were like, all right, we got it.
And didn't the same sort of thing occur when that film House of Gucci came out and everyone did that Italian accent?
Or whatever accent that was that Gaga was doing.
Yeah,
I don't know.
That was. It's a thing. It's a go-to. It's a thing.
It is, and Moonstruck, I think, as well. In this era of movies, for sure. My Cousin Vinny.
Yeah. We finished Shelley's introduction, and we get our cast list. And I was watching this cast list, and I had forgotten just how many really great character actors were in this. James Coburn. I completely forgot that he was in this, and he's our main villain. James Belushi, Vito Scotti, we discussed, he's our actual Italian born. I remember him from Gilligan's Island. This guy was guest starred on every TV show in the 60s. He was on The Flying Nun. He was on Batman. He was on everything. I'd completely forgotten he was in this too, but great character actor. Cool to see him in here.